Hi everybody, it's Heidi. I'm going to go ahead and make a video and show y'all how to make the corrugated plastic molds that I've been using. I've been asked quite a few times how to make them, and it seems like it's easier for me to just show you than to tell you or to direct you to a website. The website that I looked at wasn't extremely specific, and there's a few tips and tricks that I've learned along the way to help making a better mold out of the corrugated plastic. You can make molds for loaves like this one, or you can go ahead and make some pan style loaves if you like doing pan style. I like to do both, so I make both. So there's a few things that you're going to need when you go ahead and get started on this project. You are going to need a yardstick. You're going to need a tape measure. You could possibly get by with just the yardstick, but I prefer a tape measure for measuring. You're going to need a box cutter, preferably very sharp. Now would be a good time to change the blade on yours if yours is a little bit older. A sharp pencil and a Sharpie are going to help you out. And you also will need a piece of paper to plan what you want to make out of your molds. You can just go ahead and cut away at your piece of corrugated plastic and then kind of make molds out of what you have left as far as size. And I've done that in the past, but I found that I like very particular sized bars, and if I do just a little planning ahead of time, I can get the most bang for my buck as far as my piece of corrugated plastic. The last thing that you're going to need, obviously, is a piece of corrugated plastic. I can't show you the whole thing because it won't fit in my camera space, but I'll show you how to cut it down into a more workable piece. When you go shopping for your corrugated plastic, I tend to purchase mine at Lowe's just because it's closer to my house and I know what they have there. But there's corrugated plastic in two different places. If you head to the aisle that has things like the for sale signs or the garage sale signs, or I think it has mailboxes and numbers for on houses in the same aisle, there are smaller pieces of corrugated plastic that are $9.98, at least here. If you head a little bit further down, in my store it's one more aisle down to where the glass cutter is and where the plexiglass and the clear glass is, they have larger sheets. The sheets that are by the home for sale signs are 30 inches by 24 inches, but the larger sheets are $9.97. So they are 1 cent cheaper, and they are 30 inches by 36 inches. And the smaller piece I can get 2 molds out of. The bigger piece I can get 4 molds out of, and it's $1 cheaper. So take the time, look around the corner, find the bigger piece. If you're only going to make 1 or 2 molds, you could get the smaller piece, but like I said, you're going to pay a penny more. At least that's what the prices are here. And you might always have the extra left over that you could just store until you're ready to make another mold. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is make our plan. Okay, I'm going to show you my plan here in 2 different parts. I'm going to show you the molds that I plan to make, and then I'm going to show you how I plotted them out on my piece of paper to make sure that I can get the most molds out of the piece that I have. So here I'm going to be making 4 different molds. I have 2 pan style loaves and 3 different loaf style molds, and then I have 1 smaller pan style mold for a 1 pound sample batch, and that I just am making because I had a little square left over to use and I hate to waste any of the plastic. So here I have them labeled A, B, C, D, E, and F, and I have each of the dimensions written out. When you go ahead and look closer, this mold is the one I'm going to be showing you how to make today. It's mold A. Mold A is going to be a pan style loaf. I want it to make 2 bars wide and 5 bars long, so we'll be making 10 total bars for this mold. My bars are going to be 3 inches wide by 2.5 inches long. So it's going to be 2 columns of bars and then 5 rows. So it would be split down the middle and then 5 different. So 2 bars wide is 6 inches, which I have here, and 5 bars at 2.5 inches is 12.5 inches. So the internal measurement without the folded flaps is going to be 6 inches by 12.5 inches. I'm going to be adding to that the sides that are going to be holding the soap in. Now, since I don't intend to make these bars very deep, for my pan bars I usually make them an inch, inch and a quarter. I'm only going to make 2.5 inch sides. I found that it works a little bit better if you add some length onto your sides versus how high you're going to make your bar. If you would make it smaller, say if I knew I was only going to pour an inch and a half and I made my sides an inch and a half, they're going to be more likely to bow on me, and then I would have to prop the sides up with books or jars or whatever. And some things that you can prop your mold up with, like for example bricks, will force your soap to gel because they insulate the heat into the mold. And then you end up with things like a partial gel, and I don't prefer to gel my soaps. So I'm going to be adding 2.5 inches on each side for the flaps that are going to fold up for my mold. So here you can see I've added 2.5 here, 2.5 here, 2.5 here, 2.5 here. Now 2.5 and 2.5 is 5 inches, so I'm going to be adding 5 inches to each of my measurements. So 6 plus 5 is 11 total inches wide that I need my first piece to be, and 12.5 plus 5 is going to be 17.5 inches long, which is what I need my first piece to be. If I were doing something like a loaf mold, if we turn over here, this is a 3-inch bar loaf mold, and you see instead of the 6, this is going to be a loaf, so I have just one 3-inch wide bar. My length instead is going to be longer, it's going to be 10.5 inches. I like to make my loaves 10 bars. I add the extra ½ inch because sometimes the ends of the bars, you just want to cut them off, they're not as pretty. And then my side flaps are going to be much taller because they're going to be holding in a loaf. So on this one I'm going to make 5 inches on each side. So my total width here is going to be 13 inches, 5 plus 5 plus 3, and my total length here is going to be 20.5 inches, which is going to be 5 plus 10.5 plus 5, and that would make a loaf mold. Now that I have all of the dimensions for my molds set and I've explained to you how I found them, I took the dimensions for both of my pieces of corrugated plastic and I kind of planned out which molds I wanted to put where. These I did yesterday. These molds were both 12.5 inches by 14 inches. They were the same mold. And so I was able to cut off a 12.5 inch piece and then cut it smaller. Today I'm going to start with these two molds. These two molds are both 11 inches on one side, and then one is 17.5 and one is 10. So I can go ahead and take my piece of corrugated plastic, measure off 11 inches, and cut that chunk off so I have a much smaller piece to work with. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, here's my piece of corrugated plastic. Like I said, it's much too large for me to fit into the screen, so I'm going to have to kind of show you bit by bit what we're going to be doing. My measurements for those molds are going to be 11 inches by the 17 and 11 inches by the 10. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take my tape measure, hook it on the end, and measure 11 inches. Go ahead and make a mark with my pencil. And I move, sorry you can't see, it's how the camera moved closer to me. I made another 11-inch mark. I like to make 3 or 4 of them just to make sure that I'm not off kilter. The one nice part about corrugated plastic is the corrugation marks are straight, so you can easily see that you're measuring straight and not crooked, because sometimes when you measure crooked, then your line isn't quite exactly true to the length it needs to be. Alright, now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take my yardstick. I'm going to connect those lines. And this is one of those lines where it pays to measure carefully. Go ahead and draw a line. Once you get past this first business of getting your large piece cut smaller, it's much easier to handle these pieces. See if you can see my pencil line here. See? And now what you're going to do is take your box cutter and cut along this line. You do not have to worry about cutting through both layers of the corrugated plastic at once. Once you cut one side, you're going to be able to bend the corrugated plastic, and it will offer you an area where you can cut through easily from the other side. Please do be careful with your box cutter. You don't want to end up having a Sparkle Princess Band-Aid on your finger too. It can be very sharp, and for this project, the sharper the better. I'm going to go ahead and start on the line and cut just through one layer. Now I am cutting against the grain of the corrugation of my plastic, so it's going to be kind of bumpy, and I'm going to have to concentrate on going as straight as possible. But like I said, you really just need to score through that top layer so that when you fold it, you are able to cut the rest of it from the other side. There we go. Sorry that a lot of that cutting was off camera. This is just such a large piece, it's hard to deal with it on camera. So now, as you can see, I'm bending it, and all of those little veins in between the two layers are stretching. See if you can see. Let's make it better. So I have my two pieces are cut. Those veins stretched, but I can open and close it still. So what I'm going to do is have it bent like so, and I'm going to go ahead and cut down the other side to make my piece come apart. You do want to be careful that you're fairly straight. Your knife will want to follow the line that you already cut, but don't just go willy-nilly. Do concentrate on it a little bit so that you get a nice straight line down to the bottom. And there you go, two pieces are apart. So now I have a much easier piece to use that is going to be only 11 inches wide instead of the 36 inches wide. Okay, sorry for the interruption. My dogs decided that the trash men were stealing our trash, and I figured you didn't want to listen to them barking. The next thing that I want you to do, now that we have a smaller piece that is easier to handle, is to go ahead and look at the edge here and see how it's a U shape. We're going to go ahead and cut these little flaps off very carefully by shaving them down a little bit at a time. The reason that we're going to do that is because two reasons. One is that if you dribble soap in them, it is kind of a pain to get out. And secondly, we're going to do that because if you like to mark your molds, like every inch or inch and a half or inch and a quarter or whatever measurement you like to cut your bars so you know where to place your embeds, it's hard to get the marker inside between those grooves. It's easier if you cut them off and you have a nice smooth area to deal with. I found that when I do this, it's easiest, for me at least, to go ahead and shave a little bit of both at a time. You don't have to do it all at once, just do a little bit by little bit until you get rid of all of those two plastic areas. I'm going to go ahead and move you a little bit closer because it's going to be easier for me to show you what I'm doing without having to reach so far. So, little by little, I'm going to go ahead and shave those down. You are better taking your time here so you don't end up cutting through the top and getting a nice smooth edge. If you do end up messing up and cutting through the top a little bit and making a little hole, it's not the end of the world. You can always plug it with something like some hot glue, or you can super glue a piece of plastic over it to patch it. So either which way, it's not a crisis if you do, but try and be careful and not. I found also that it works a little bit better if you shave little bits at a time versus trying to do it all in one go. Sometimes the vein of plastic that is between them is crooked too, and that's just fine. Just get it as close as you can, and it's okay if that vein that's on the inside is further forward or back on one side or the other. That little bit is not going to really make a difference in your bar of soap. So now what we're going to do, now that we have that nice smooth edge, let me show you the edge. See, now it's no longer that U shape. It's nice and flat. We're going to go ahead and use that and measure our next measurement. And this mold we said was going to be 11 inches by 17.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my pencil and my tape measure again. I'm going to go ahead and measure 17.5 inches. My daughter was absolutely amazed the other day to know that if you push this little button on the tape measure, it makes the tape measure not go out anymore. I showed her that and it was like earth-shattering. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this. Now when you are measuring, it's really difficult to cut if you cut exactly on the corrugation indents where that vein goes through. So if you land close to a vein, I would opt to go right on the other side of it, because if you go on the inside of it, we're going to be shaving that down too, and then you'll get like 1/4 of an inch off on what you're doing. I'm going to measure this in 3 places too, because that's just how I like to do. And go ahead and take my yardstick and connect my lines, my dots. 1, 2, 3 dots, and make another line with my pencil that I can follow to cut this. Alright, I'm going to double check on that measurement. And it should be 17.5, and we are at 17.5. So now I will take my box cutter very carefully, and I'm going to just cut through one layer of the corrugated plastic. I don't have to try and cut through both all at once. If you have a kind of work table where it doesn't matter if your knife goes through, you are welcome to. I'm working on my marble countertop. It wouldn't kill it if I cut all the way through, but really it's just going to be easier for you to cut through one layer, turn it around, and cut through again. Much easier to cut through a smaller piece, let me tell you. Alright, so I've made that cut, and now watch, I can bend my board, and here is how I'm going to cut. I don't like to cut from the side I already cut. I like to go on the back side. And see if I can do it how you can see it. Just going to go ahead and follow that cut all the way down. It should want to go right in the crack where you already have cut and folded. Sorry, that was kind of just a lot of my hands. This piece is the small piece. We're done with that for now. You can go ahead and set it aside. This is the longer piece that's going to be making our mold. So now we can go ahead and do the same thing on here. See how it's got the uneven? This is the first side I cut. This is the second side that I cut. when I had it folded. And I'm going to shave those both down so that I have a nice even side there again. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do with this piece is go ahead and make some markings for where our sides are going to fold up. When I do this, I'm going to be making my marks on what's going to be my back side. So most of the time it doesn't matter. The corrugated cardboard does come with a price sticker on it. I personally don't feel the need to pull it off. Usually what I just do is make sure that's on the back side. This particular chunk that I have back and the front side look pretty much the same, so I'm going to go ahead and measure those out. So I'm going to take my tape measure, and these need to have 2.5 inches on each edge. So now I'm going with the corrugations right now. So my corrugations are running this way. So I'm going to measure 2.5, and I want to make sure again that doesn't fall right exactly on a corrugation, which it's not, so that's great. And I'm going to go ahead and connect those dots and make a line. Now, since this internal marks are the size of what your mold is going to be, you do want to be precise. Especially, like I said, if you're like me and you have a very standard size of bar that you're looking for, you want to make sure your measurement is precise. The next thing that I'm going to do now is, you would think I would just go ahead and measure 2.5 inches from the other side, but I'm not going to. I'm going to measure what the length of my inside is going to be, and hopefully have 2.5 or close to it on the other side. The reason I'm doing that is because remember we shaved these sides down a little bit, so one side might not be quite as long as the other if our measurement got off by a little bit. So I'm going to go and measure. The internal measurement that I want this to be is 12.5. So if I add the 2.5 here plus the 12.5, I should come to 15 inches. I'm going to go ahead and mark that. That is fortunately also lying just exactly on the far side of a corrugation mark. And mark that, and if I go ahead and take a look, I have actually exactly 2.5 inches past that mark. So that worked out absolutely beautifully. Sometimes I've had it not work out so great, and it's easier for you to have one of your walls be a little bit off than it is to have your inside be a little bit off. Because if for me, the inside measurement are what I split from my logs and bars, and if the outside measurement of the wall is a little bit off, it doesn't matter, because remember we added that extra height on there. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this way. I'm going to find the straightest side, because one of my sides was the pre-cut factory cut side, and one of the sides is the one that I cut. Now I cut fairly straight, but factory side is always going to be straighter than what I cut, even if I'm being precise. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 2.5 inches. I'm going to mark the longer side in 3 places just because that's how I do. And I'm going to go ahead and connect those 3 lines, or those 3 dots, and make a line. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did from the other side. My width I want to be 6 inches, so 6 plus 2.5 is going to be 8.5 inches. Sorry, I can do math really. So 8.5, and I have just a smidge over 2.5 inches left over. So it's good that I'm doing it this way. I mean, it's not a lot. It's like a 1/16 of an inch, but still, if you're going to have somewhere be precise, you want it to be the inside. So better to go ahead and measure it this way. So now I'm going to connect those lines again. Flipping my yardstick over because there's one place where it's got a knot in it and it doesn't draw an extremely straight line, which is probably how I got off a little bit on that one side. Alright, now we have one last set of lines to draw, if you can see this. ignore the mess. If you can see, I have the lines drawn. It should look almost exactly like my drawing, except without the numbers written on. The last mark that I'm going to make, I'm going to zoom you closer so you can see, is I am going to connect where my two pencil lines meet and the corner. And that is going to be the cut that allows us to fold this into a box, kind of like a piece of origami. So I'm going to go ahead line up my yardstick with the outer corner with that inner place where my pencil lines connect and draw a line. There you go. So there's the two lines, make the square that are going to be my edge lines, and then that diagonal line is what's going to allow me to fold this up. So I'm going to repeat that for all four corners. Two, three, and four. So let me zoom you out again and see if you can see my pencil lines. A little bit light for you to see, but you can see I have pencil line here, pencil line here, pencil line here, pencil line here, and then each, of the diagonal corners are drawn. So I have a lot of dust going on in my house today. So now what we're going to do, and this is extremely important, we are not going to cut through both layers of plastic. Do not cut through both layers of plastic. What you're going to be doing is just scoring one side so that it will fold, and the other side is going to remain intact, and that's what keeps your soap on the inside so it doesn't dribble out the corners. So if you are a person who has a heavy hand, you know that when you were cutting your first sections that you were going kind of deep. Cut your ones that are crossways first so that you kind of get used to it, and then cut the others because you really need to cut very lightly on the sides. So you're going to follow the line exactly. I don't really recommend using a ruler to follow for these, just because if you do, it's easy to get off track and then you'll have a crooked line and a crooked mold. But I'm following my pencil line exactly. I'm not cutting through. I apologize, apparently the mailman is now trying to steal our mailbox. Every day, the same thing. Okay, so I did one along the corrugation, now I'm going to start along another corrugation. I'm not cutting through all of those veins. You don't have to cut that deep that you're cutting through all the veins to the bottom. When I go to fold this, those veins that are connecting the top and the bottom pieces of the corrugated plastic are going to stretch, so I don't have to worry about cutting all the way through them. I just need to score through the top layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the sides. Just enough to go through the top layer and not through the bottom layer. If you do cut through the bottom layer, you're going to have soap leaking out of your mold, and you'll have to find a way to patch it with something that the soap won't eat through. Just checking this is right on the other side of that vein, so I'm making sure I'm cutting in the right place. Right. Now that I've cut 4 of the outside marks, I'm going to cut these corner marks. They are going to go against the veins. So again, you don't need to try and cut all the way through the veins. Just score the top. And I promise they will stretch and bend when you go to fold your mold. Alright, all of my cuts are made. So what you can do, sorry, just getting rid of all of the shavings, is the 2 that go parallel with the corrugation fold really easy. The other ones, you might need to give it a little bit of work and it might make some creaking sounds, but you can see those internal corrugations are going to stretch and it's going to fold just fine. We did not cut all the way through, as you can see. It's not all the way through. If you look at it from the other side, it's still completely intact. So do the same thing with the other corrugated side. Go ahead and give it a fold. Like I said, it might make some creaky sounds. It's not going to be nearly as easy to fold as those ones that went parallel with the corrugations are, but it will bend. And then you're going to do the same thing with the corners. Remember that those are against the corrugations, so they're going to take a bit to stretch, but they will go. When you do this, take a look and see. Just folding, sorry. I missed a little bit of the corner here I need to cut. Okay. So when you fold your mold, the corners are going to want to go a particular direction that is easier for them. They like to go with the grain of the corrugation. Hopefully you can see that. The corrugated grain is running this way. Then where they're folded in the inside, see this little flap? That is where one side of plastic is overlapping. You can go ahead and leave that, or you can trim it out. It's completely up to you. I like to trim it out because it makes my corners a little less rounded, but it is another potential place where you might cut through and wreck your molds. So you got to be very careful. But if you go ahead and cut that out, like so, and when you go ahead to fold, you see that's no longer overlapping, and on the inside you get a little bit tighter of a corner. So I'm going to do that on all of my sides real quick. Depending where your measurements fall, it might fall on one side or the other side of that fold for the corner. So you just kind of need to, I usually fold it up first, and then the one that is kind of bendy and sticking out, you can see it's bendy and sticking out, that's the one I'm going to cut off right there. And you don't even really need to cut it out perfectly. Even just a little bit of it cut out will help quite a bit. I do find this to be one of the more difficult cuts to make on the whole project because it's little and it's in a little area and it's hard to hold on to sometimes. But usually once you get it started, you can grab a hold of the edge and pull on it, and that pull it up, and that will help you know where you're supposed to navigate. That may or may not have been how I ended up with a Sparkle Princess Band-Aid though. Alright, so now here's what you have. You have a piece of corrugated plastic with all of these cuts on the outside. You have 2 parallel cuts top and the sides, 2 parallel cuts here, and the corners cut. So now, just like origami, you're going to go ahead and fold it up. goodness, I really have a lot of dust in my house today. I found that there are several different things that you can use to connect these corners. And most of them you can get at the dollar store. You can use binder clips. These are great. You fold your corner, stick the binder clip on, and you don't even have to stick the, I just find it irritating having to put them back up. Binder clip, and you get a nice tight corner. If I'm doing a loaf mold, I tend to put 2 just so that it's tight on the top and the bottom. You can find binder clips at the dollar store. These I also found at the dollar store. And you can find clothespins at the dollar store. I'm pretty sure clothespins would work too, I just haven't used them. So you can stick that. You can to the other side, and do the same thing. Fold up the side and go ahead and clip the edges. I do have these little clips. They are sewing clips actually that you can use to attach seams without using a pin. I find that they are just barely big enough to go around both layers of corrugated plastic, so I tend not to use them unless I'm running short. So there's 3 quarters connected and 4 corners connected, and now we have our mold that will make 2 rows 3 inches wide by 5 rows 2.5 inches wide. So what I would end up doing then is taking my Sharpie and a ruler and going along and measuring where I would end up wanting to cut, so that when I'm working on designs in the middle, I know where exactly my bar designations are. The other thing that I like to do is to go on the back and I write the mold dimensions. I write the inner dimensions, I don't write the side dimensions. So this is 6 inches by 12.5 inches, and it makes 10 3 by 2.5 inch bars. That way when I am digging through my stack of molds, I can easily see which one it is that I'm looking for. So I hope that you have learned how to make your own molds. These are dirt cheap. I love using them. When you go ahead and make your soap in them, as soon as your soap is ready to be cut, all you need to do is take the clips off, and the sides will just peel away from your soap. You can lift it out and go ahead and cut. Hopefully this has been more informational for you as far as somebody just saying, oh, you do this and that and cut and it's done. The website that I first looked at just kind of had a diagram and no directions, but this should hopefully make it easier for you to make your own molds this way. Have a great afternoon. Bye.